I must admit that when I first heard about gaming Chromebooks, I was a little bit confused. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not because I don't think Chromebooks are good. In fact, I really like them, and my main laptop right now has become once again a Chromebook, and I'm enjoying it quite a bit. But gaming has never really been a big part of that equation. Browsing the web, running Android apps, sure, but actually gaming on it, again, that just was never something that crossed my mind. However, I recently got the opportunity to take a look at this bad boy here, the Acer Chromebook 516 GE. I've been putting it through its paces, and in this video, we're going to dive in pretty deep into this subject. What are these gaming Chromebooks good for? What kind of gaming are you going to be doing on this thing, and how well does that work? First things first, let's kind of go around this device. This is the Acer Chromebook 516 GE, with GE standing for Gaming Edition. You can see it has this kind of two-tone look going on, which I really like. Brushed metal look on one part, and then I don't know how you would describe that. You can see it with your own eyes, but a different look there. If we flip it over, you can see we have two pretty large raised feet there, which I think is going to give you some more airflow, because of course this thing does have a fairly decent processor in it. If we open it up here, we actually have the benefit of some of the specs being listed here. We have an Intel Core i5 Iris Xe graphics. Some really impressive stuff here. This thing has a 120 hertz display, which is 2560 by 1600, which means it's actually a little bit taller than 16 by 9. That is fantastic. Maybe a little bit strange for a gaming device, but still, I like it being there for every other reason. There is an RGB keyboard, which if I turn off these lights here, you can see that it is set to purple right now. We'll take a closer look at that a little bit later. Some pretty darn good speakers here firing upward. They're pretty bass heavy. As you can hear, they're a little bit muffled. They're relatively loud, but not the best speakers in the world as far as I'm concerned. Pretty bass heavy, a little bit muffled, but still pretty good. And if you're gaming, they're going to do just fine for that. This thing actually also has an Ethernet port on the side, RJ45, 2.5 gigabit Ethernet. It also has Wi-Fi 6E. Both of these things are going to be very important because some of the gaming you might want to do on this thing is going to be streaming. We'll take a look at that in a little bit as well. HDMI 2.1 also on board. If we go around the edges here, USB-A, there's an HDMI. There is also a USB-C port there, which is good because there's actually two of them. A Kensington port, Kensington lock, I guess that's the right way to describe that over there. Coming over to this side, there is the other USB-C port. There is your Ethernet and then a headphone jack. How's this for an underappreciated win? One finger to open, no problem at all. Love it. If we talk a little bit further about this screen, I am really impressed with it. The colors are very vibrant. This thing is tack sharp, really nice looking screen. And if I fire up the Chrome browser here and I kind of move back and forth between this, of course, I'm not going to be posting this video at 120 hertz, but let me just tell you that in person, this is unbelievably smooth. 120 hertz is fantastic. I do need to point out though, this is not a touch screen. No matter how many times I reach up there to try and use it as a touch screen, that is simply not going to work. Taking a look here at the keyboard and trackpad, let's slide up just a little bit. Maybe we can get all this in screen. Let's start with the trackpad. It is very large and it is very smooth. It has taken a little bit of getting used to for me though, just because there's something about the feel of Chromebook trackpads that just never quite lines up perfectly for me. I've dialed in some of the settings and it's definitely better. Love the size, but again, it's going to take a little bit of getting used to coming from the feel of a Windows trackpad. I can't even really tell you what the difference is. I can just tell you that it feels a little bit strange to me. In terms of the keyboard, it is okay. It does have a little bit of a squishy feel to it. It's not like a really clicky gaming keyboard, as you can hear there, but that's not something that's super surprising because of the place they put the speakers over here. It does end up feeling pretty cramped to me. I don't have big hands, and it still feels relatively cramped. I wish it was a bit more spread out than it is. I will say though, not a ton of deck flex on this device. The overall hardware feels very solidly built. And it's actually not nearly as heavy as I was expecting it to be. Based on how the rest of the hardware feels, you think this thing's going to be a very heavy device. It's really not too bad. I would say the only build quality thing that's been a little bit weird to me is that USB-A port over here on the side. When I've tried to put a flash drive in, and I've used 2 different flash drives. For some reason, it's just really, really tight. Maybe you can tell how hard I'm having to push that in. There's something weird about that. It's very, very tight for some reason. Not sure what to make of that. So with a very lightweight, sort of minimal operating system like Chrome OS that runs fairly well on lower end hardware, do you see much of a difference with this higher end hardware, with this faster processor, a full-fledged Core i5 versus what's on a lot of other Chromebooks that might be ARM or might be running a Pentium processor, something like that? The answer is absolutely you do, in particular when you are firing up Android applications. They load up so much faster than before, and of course some of this is going to be due not only to that processor, but also the much faster internal storage that is on board on this device as well. Like I said, these apps fire up so much faster than they do on other lower-end Chromebooks. You're into games like Minecraft much, much quicker, and then of course when you're playing these games, again like Minecraft, you're going to have far fewer stutters than you would have otherwise. And even, launching multimedia apps that are Android apps, things like HBO's Max application, you're just going to get in and out of these apps way faster on this device than you might be doing on a lower end Chromebook. So it's got decent speakers, it launches applications faster, it's got a high refresh rate, fairly bright, really nice looking screen, all that's great, but it's a gaming device. So let's jump into some gaming first. One of the first things I thought to do on this was to go into the Google Play Store and install some emulators, pull some ROMs off my main PC, throw them on this Chromebook, and fire them up. So we're going to go through not like an exhaustive list of emulators, right? We're going to keep it fairly simple. N64, PSP, GameCube. I think that is a pretty good smattering of tests that will give you a general idea of what you're going to be dealing with and what you can expect out of this device. And spoiler alert, it did a lot better than I thought it was going to. So just talking over this B-roll here, the first game you're seeing is the GameCube version of Super Smash Bros. Melee. Now, in the settings for the Dolphin emulator, just the one in the Google Play Store, I did have to go in and change this over to Vulkan, but once I did this, I was able to push the internal resolution all the way up to 1080p. And as you can see here with a with an Xbox controller paired to this via Bluetooth, this ran shockingly well. I was pretty sure this was going to be a small disaster, and instead it was like 95, 98% perfect. Almost no stutters at all. A really solid experience. Now, the second game that we're going to look at here, also on the GameCube, is Metroid Prime. Again, we are pushing this thing all the way up to 1080p. You could see a stutter there when I switched into the morph ball mode. But in terms of, like, if you're asking, is this playable? Could you play Metroid Prime, the GameCube version, like this? Well, first you got to get past those controls that just really do not hold up to what we expect modern FPS controls to be like today. But if you can get past that, yes, I think this is absolutely going to be playable. Now, it's possible in more complex sections of the game later. You might need to lower that internal resolution from 1080p, but still, it's going to look better than it did on the GameCube, and you're playing it on a Chromebook, which is wild. Now, this is, of course, the N64 emulator, Mupen, I believe is how that's pronounced. Mupen 64. This is Super Mario 64. This is something that should run fine, but there are often some weird problems with Mario in this one as well. I also had to go in and change the renderer. I forget which one it was. Maybe I can remember to put it in the description. But as you can see here, I'm playing it just fine. Did not quite get all of those in one go, but boom, there we go. Getting my first star in this game just fine. It looks good. It runs fantastically well, although you would expect that to be the case. Now, the next game that we're going to be looking at is actually on the PSP. This is Grand Theft Auto Vice City Stories. Again, we've pushed the resolution up to 1080p. This game looks better than it ever looked on the PSP itself, even though I can't drive all that well in this game, crashing into the back of that box truck. You can see that it's running exceptionally well. PSP games should not be much of an issue at all for this thing. Again, some of them, you may have to reduce that internal resolution, but I think for the most part, 1080p is going to be fine. Perfect Dark is an N64 game that is very difficult to run in emulators, and it did a pretty admirable job here, even if I did feel a few stutters here and there, which is, again, to be expected with a game like Perfect Dark. And again, controls not great for first-person shooters back then. But let's take this up a notch, because what you're seeing now is Rocket League. And this is not streaming. I installed Steam on this Chromebook, which is a thing you can do now, and you can install Windows games, which run through the Proton compatibility layer in exactly the same way that a Steam Deck does. And by doing this, what you're seeing, on low settings, I could not keep this thing maxed out or anything crazy, but as you can see here, we are actually running Rocket League on the Chromebook itself at 30 to 45, sometimes up to 50 FPS. Now, unfortunately, when it came to this functionality using Steam on the Chromebook, it was more bad than good. I tried several other games, like I believe I tried Sons of the Forest, and it would not go anywhere. It would get so far in and crashed. I even tried different compatibilities with the Proton. You can change the Proton version. Tried some different things there. That kept crashing. I think I tried Dinkum as well, which is like an Animal Crossing game, and it also did not get past the launch screen. It also did not want to work. So if you're buying this to install Steam and play Steam games, I'd say there's going to be some that are going to work better than you think, but a lot of other ones are just not up and running yet. There's a reason that in order to do this, you got to go change a flag on the Chromebook and install it. It's not like totally released yet to everybody. That's why it's not super stable just yet. So when it comes to gaming locally on it, okay, you're dealing with Android apps, which a lot of them are going to run really quite well, although this is not a touch screen. So you're going to be looking for games that have either mouse and keyboard support or controller support, and those are few and far between. Also, Emulation is going to be, honestly, a lot better of an experience than I was expecting it to be. And you can also install Steam. That's pretty hit or miss. So local gaming is okay. One big thing we've got to keep in mind, this thing has a 120 hertz refresh rate panel. None of this stuff is probably going to be hitting 120 FPS to take advantage of the high refresh rate panel. But you know what might take advantage of that? This is something that just got posted on the 31st. You're probably seeing this after this date, depending on when I'm actually going to be able to release this. But take a trip to the Forgotten Realms with your Chromebook and GeForce Now. This is a blog post on blog.google.com. And the main highlight of this blog post is that right now, Google is giving away 3 months of GeForce Now priority membership for free to any Chromebook owner. You can go and redeem this and get 3 months of GeForce Now right now for free. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to accept this, and we're going to test out GeForce Now and see if it can actually be a viable gaming solution on this device. And so a game that was not working well locally, Sons of the Forest, we have fired this thing up, and it actually has my save still. Like, it logged me into Steam on this, non-local computer that I'm effectively streaming from. That's unbelievable. So all my Steam inventory, all my games are already on there. My saves are already cloud synced. I'm just loading into my game. And just like that, we are up and running. So this is obviously a first-person game. So the first thing I need to do is I need to talk about how this latency feels. And obviously my sensitivity is too high. So let's jump into the settings. We're going to drop this down to about there. And guys, I'm kind of in shock right now. I cannot believe how responsive this feels. This is unbelievable. I'm not even on Ethernet. I'm just running Wi-Fi. And if I sat down in front of this computer and no one told me anything, I would think this was running natively. I would just think, yeah, you're just playing a game on your laptop. I cannot believe how performant this is. I need to try and get a shot of this. I don't know how well this is going to work, but maybe you can see from that perspective. That is really impressive. I mean, if we're going to do this, we might as well go big and go straight up to Doom, a really fast-paced first-person shooter, and see if this thing feels decent also. I don't remember how to do it. There it is. Definitely got the sensitivity set a little bit too high in this one as well. I'm also trying to play this with a camera on a tripod in front of me. Just making it a little bit awkward. because I forgot to show it in my excitement. Vertical sync is turned off. We are running Doom at almost 200 FPS. So yes, that 120 hertz display is absolutely doing its thing. As someone who has used Xbox Game Pass streaming multiple times and have never been able to enjoy it on anything first person at all, I am shocked at how well that is actually working. I guess I do need to document what kind of like Wi-Fi speed I'm getting, because over there I'm about 5 feet from my router, so I'm probably in the best possible situation. So let's look at my latency and all that stuff, and then maybe that'll kind of give you some context. So as you can see here, I've done my speed test, and 794 down, 770 up is pretty darn good. I do have fiber internet, and I am only about 6 feet from my router. So this is probably like a best case scenario type thing. And what's crazy to me is I'm not even using Ethernet. This was Wi-Fi, and it was still that good. So take a look at what your speeds are, what everything you've got going on is, and maybe, you know, if you don't have quite as good of an internet connection, you're probably going to see a bit more latency to what I was seeing. But in the best case scenario, again, I keep saying this over and over, I can't believe how good that was. All right, guys, let's try to wrap this thing up. I believe this is the exact model that I was sent. As you can see here, Core i5, 8 gigs of RAM, 256 gigabyte PCIe SSD. Got that 120 hertz display, and it is $599. Boy, this is a complicated review because so much of this has been really positive. I really like the hardware. I really like the performance inside Chrome OS. I like having access to the Android apps, but I don't like not having a touchscreen. Yeah, the emulation was better than I expected. The Android apps run really, really well, but if you're getting this thing for gaming, you're going to want to play full-fledged PC games, and for my testing, by far the best way to do that is through GeForce Now. At least from what I've seen, that's better than Xbox Game Pass. That's the best streaming experience I've ever had, besides maybe using Moonlight to stream my own games to the computer, and even that is really, really close. And if you're going to use the GeForce experience, you're going to be paying, $9 a month for what we just got 3 months of for free. I believe that's the correct tier. You can do that on any device. So do you really need this Chromebook? Well, if you want the 120 hertz refresh rate on the screen, the RGB keyboard, that maybe pulls you over. Pretty good speakers. It sounded better than I expected them to in actual gaming. So again, this is a really, really complicated thing to give my thoughts on. This is what I'll say. If you're looking for a Chromebook first, and you just want a rock-solid Chromebook with good performance, good battery life, good build quality, you like the high refresh rate screen for that smoothness, $599 is already pretty reasonable. And then you throw in the fact that, yes, it can do the GeForce Now stuff. You can run emulators. I think that makes it a fairly compelling device. It is just weird to call it a gaming device when the best gaming it can do isn't actually happening on the device. So again, it's a strange review, but it's a product that honestly, I have really enjoyed testing. So guys, I'm going to drop an Amazon link in the description down below. If you want to grab one yourself, that will give commission to this channel. I do want to say a big thanks to the Google PR team for sending this thing over for me to test as a loaner. I may try to hold on to it as long as I can. If you really need it back, send me an email, I guess. Otherwise, I'm going to pretend like it's mine for a little while longer. Guys, thanks for watching. Subscribe for more content just like this. And until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.